girl, real talk. This whole "it's new year, time to reinvent myself" trash is not the vibe for 2024. You can find someone who loves you for you, as you are. You don't need to read a stack of self-help books, only eat sad salads, or start meditating at 5 a.m. to be ready for dating. So yeah, my advice is to download Bumble and find someone who embraces you the way you are right now. Let me know how it goes.
Listen to the 48 Hours podcast for shocking murder cases and compelling real-life dramas from one of television's most watched true crime shows. Go behind the scenes of each episode with award-winning CBS News correspondents and producers in Postmortem, a weekly deep dive. Listen to 48 Hours wherever you get your podcasts.
A note to listeners: the following podcast contains content that may not be suitable for all audiences. Discretion is advised.
I know the Nipps pretty well. I know the DA. I hired him. I know the sheriff. I know the judge in Love County. I hired him. And I know that area well. Climate and the atmosphere, and nothing changes. This was a spur of the moment. Something happened. It turned tragic. I don't think it was all this coordinated, executed plan. That takes too much.
Conn Nipp apparently had a freezer on his front porch, but was on the phone with somebody else and heard him say, "I can't use this freezer because they'll know it's gone."
You are listening to Partners in True Crime. We are your hosts, Rob and Cindy Dorfman.
Today we have a very interesting guest on the podcast. He is someone who knows both the history of Love County and the legal landscape that surrounds it.
Gary Henry is an attorney who's been practicing law for 37 years, 9+ years as a prosecutor, and 7 years as a public defender handling only murder and death penalty cases.
From 1995 to 1999, Gary served as the district attorney for the 20th Judicial District, which includes Love and Carter County.
Gary doesn't live in that area any longer, but after listening to the podcast, he decided to reach out to us to give us his perspective on the case and the people involved in it.
We're very excited to have his insight and expertise.
So I've been listening to the podcast. I'm not to 15 yet. I'm on episode 10 right now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But I found it fascinating, and I just threw out there, because I have not any, I would just tell you, I told you the message, I don't have any personal knowledge at all about this case, but I know all the players and have dealt with most of them, other than some of the ones that are, under 25 years old. I haven't really didn't know, but I know the Nipps pretty well. I know the DA. I hired him. I know the sheriff. I know the judge in Love County. I hired him. And I know that area well, and the climate and the atmosphere, and nothing changes. I just thought if you were interested in anything I could maybe shed some light on as far as just how that operates down there. That place is a strange place, and Love County is even stranger. So I'm just going to say this. In episode 10 today, Rob, as I was listening, you made the comment, and I think you are about 99% right. I think to a great extent, listening to all these different druggies and people in the drug culture tell you all these different wild stories about all these different wild things, I can tell you from being down there and trying a lot of cases and being involved in some big cases kind of almost like this, the simplest explanation is always the explanation. All this, the drug culture down there, it doesn't matter what the case is. You get some crazy stories about this, that. In the end of the day, it was the simple thing. It's not some big sophisticated, some big organized, some big crime thing. I just don't think it is from listening to all this stuff. I think they're out there on that Nipp property. These people didn't move them anywhere. They didn't put them in a pond in Gene Autry Road. They didn't put them in a freezer. They didn't put them they might have burned them. I'm not going to argue that. They're not going to take the risk of transporting those bodies places. You risk too much. Plus, they're too lazy. They're always lazy. We had a case, I'll just tell you real quick. We had a case that wasn't similar, but it was a guy disappeared. We couldn't find him. We searched high and low. We had a suspect. We spent years searching for the guy. And his mother even told us he's too lazy to have done this or buried him there or taken him there or taken there. And long and the short, years later, there was a plane crash that involved our local congressman's children. They were flying back from a campaign event with the publisher of the Medill Record. Their plane crashed. While searchers were out searching for the plane crash, they come across the skeletal remains of this guy that we'd been hunting for years. He was in a bar ditch 2 miles from town on a heavily traveled road and had laid there for years and had not been found. And my point is, it's always the simple thing. You got to check them out. I'm not saying you don't, but some of these stories that they've been given to people, I just don't think there's anything to them. It's the drug culture.
Yeah, we feel a lot of it sometimes is misinformation and rumors, but we have to check everything out.
I know you do, and I don't even think it's planned misinformation. I think it's just druggies say all kinds of crazy stuff, and by the time it gets through 6 or 8 druggies, you've got them in a box in a pond off of Gene Autry Road, and somebody's going to fish a hand out one day. That didn't happen. I think they are probably within 100 yards of where the fire happened, if not less. I think they're on Nipp land myself. I think they're somewhere back on that back side. You know, that the Nipp property is shaped like an L, backward L. That back area back there's a pond and whatnot, at least from all the satellite views stuff I've looked at. My guess is they're back there in the woods somewhere. And my guess is they weren't buried very deep. They didn't haul them somewhere. There's too much risk of getting stopped. They're being watched too close, particularly back then. I just don't believe any of that.
Well, you also had Joe Russell, was the one that was watching him, and we feel like he was involved.
Well, I wouldn't doubt that Joe Russell would possibly be involved in covering up. I don't think he had anything to do with the killing itself. Joe was a lot of things. I don't think Joe would have participated in that. We always knew things. I knew people that thought he was crooked. I knew people that were very close to me that thought he wasn't. Some of them were very surprised by the indictment on the stuff that he got prosecuted for. Would he cover for family? Yeah, probably so. I don't doubt that. But I don't think he was directly involved in hiding the bodies. I have a hard time believing that. I'm not going to say it's not possible, but I think he may have run interference for him. Yeah.
That's what we feel that he did. I don't think he knew it was going to happen when he called off the police chase with Conn. He was just so used to doing it for Conn. Sure. So it was kind of like a reflex, or anybody else that he may have been friends with, he would have called that off for. So
I don't doubt that. That was, I'm not going to say is when I was DA, I got calls from sheriffs, but I got calls a lot from high-profile folks wanting this ticket to go away or that DUI to go away. That's just common. That happened. So I don't doubt that. I don't think it was even a planned murder. I will tell you, I've handled in my career close to 100 murder cases, and I can count on one hand with at least a finger to spare the number that were actually planned executions. The rest of them were in the heat of the moment, spur of the moment. Something happened, someone panicked, someone pulled the trigger. I don't think the story of them, that one of the girl telling you that they were taken out to get killed to relieve a debt to Conn from this, if he got Colt killed and all. I don't buy that. This was a spur of the moment. Something happened. It turned tragic. I don't think it was all this coordinated, executed, planned. That takes too much. These types of folks, these kind of drug people, they don't have that organizational ability.
Totally agree with you with that. You know, obviously when we get these tips that come in, obviously we have to look at them, and we don't know the culture down there. We spent time down there when we did our first documentary, and we got an idea of what it's like down there. But when we left and we started doing the podcast is when everything started to really bubble over. And so we started getting a lot of information, and people have been sitting on this information for a very long time. And now through the podcast, they have a safe place to speak and kind of air their concerns. So it's been overwhelming to hear all these different theories. But I agree with you. I agree with you that I think this was something that escalated very quickly, and Molly was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I think that Colt and Conn and whoever was there, Colby, they got into it. One thing led to another. And they shot him, and then Molly saw that, and they can't have her seeing this, and so she was a witness. So they had to take care of it.
Either that or Colt was hurt a lot worse than what anybody realized, and he bled out. If he had a compound fracture and it was bleeding, he could have bled out and died from shock. He could have died from exposure. He could have died from blood loss. And then at that point, everybody freaks out, and she's going to go tell. They make the decision. It's got to be one of those two in my mind. And I think they got buried somewhere real close to where you all were standing in the show, where the tree was and the investigator showed you. I bet you they're within 100 yards on it, maybe 2. And they're in a shallow grave somewhere. Nobody's found them because they haven't been able to get on Nipp land or whatever the case may be. I mean, that's my perspective. I don't think these people, they're too lazy. And it's too risky to load those bodies up in a car and drive them somewhere. There were too many people watching at that point. There's too much going on. These guys, they couldn't risk that. If there's any organization, that was it. We can't go somewhere. We got to do it here. You've got no real organized effort to find anybody. And then after so long, it kind of just fades away.
Well, it's not ever going to phase away because of Paula.
Well, in their mind, it fades away. And the truth of the matter is, my opinion is, this is one of those cases, unless somebody talks, I don't know that it'll ever be solved.
Why do you think, though, we can get a search warrant for the Nipp property? Like, if they have nothing to hide, why won't they just let them search there? Well,
the Nipp family, and I had a good relationship with Ann. I'll be honest with you, knew her for years. They're one of those families. And down in that part, Central Oklahoma, South Central Oklahoma, Little Dixie, big families like that, it's kind of a clan. I mean, they're very closed off. They're very protective of each other. I don't know what Ann knew or knows. I would like to believe she does not know the truth. But I do believe she would be fiercely protective of her children and her grandchildren and would not believe, if they said we didn't do this, she would believe that, as most mothers would. They're very protective of their family. I mean, that's just the reality. I hope she doesn't know. She may. I'll be honest with you. I'll be brokenhearted if I find out that the family knew, hid, or protected. It could be. As far as the search warrant, without seeing the affidavit, I'm not going to be able to tell you whether there was enough there or not. The lady that you were talking to in this last episode the 10 that I was listening to this morning,
Jody.
Yeah. She made the comment, and she was very correct. To get a affidavit, when you get a search warrant executed or approved, you've got to prove 2 things. 1, that a crime was committed, and 2, that there's probable cause to believe that evidence of that crime is located where you want to search. Without seeing what was in the affidavit, that's a pretty high bar. I mean, in truth, some will say, probable cause is nothing. Well, you got to have enough to convince a judge, a magistrate, that there's probable cause to believe that more probable not, that there's evidence of that crime in that location. I don't know, did they allege a crime? And 2, what evidence was there that pointed to evidence being on the Nipp property? Without seeing it, I couldn't say.
We can send it to you.
Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't mind looking at it for you and seeing what, in my mind.
I think you're right, and I think Jody pointed it out. She looked at it, and I think the gentleman, Jackie Bates, who's the officer, the deputy that they brought in outside, who reinvestigated it, he put together that.
God bless him. I think he's doing great work, but he's going to have faith in it, and he needs to have faith in it. I get that, but that doesn't mean it's really there. And a judge is looking at it from a whole different standpoint. You got to convince the judge. And I know if it went to Judge Hicks or Wallace Coppage is the district judge for that district, I know both of them very, very well. And they are both fine, upstanding men, and they are good judges. And if it was either one of them that passed on it, there was just because they didn't think there was enough there. And of course, the part of that is this, and I don't know where Craig Ladd stood on it. There was some discussion, but I wasn't sure what was being said. The bottom line is this: if it's weak or if it's just on the line, you don't want to risk it and run in there with potentially a bad search warrant and then find the evidence, because guess what? You lose it. If it's not rock solid, you lose it. And then you've totally shot your ability to prosecute.
Sure. And we understand all that. We understand the law. We understand that. We felt like the explanation that we were told, and obviously we're getting all this third hand.
Right.
That they were worried about being sued for damaging the property.
Erosion.
None of that makes sense. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know. I'm curious where that came from. I don't see the judge saying, "Oh, I'm not going to do this because of erosion." I don't buy that. The judge is either going to say yay or nay. I've never had a judge say, "I'm not going to do it because we might get sued." I don't know. Was Craig Ladd? Did he think that? From what you know, did he think the search warrant, the affidavit was sufficient, or did he not?
We don't know.
I wasn't. I wasn't clear. At some point, it sounded like he said Craig thought it was enough, and at another point, Craig said we might get sued. So I wasn't.
Well,
sure.
we would love to speak to Craig Ladd because he's come up so much in this case from the get-go, and there's a lot of things flying around about him, and we want to kind of put the record straight on him.
I'll just say this about Craig. I hired him fresh out of law school when I was DA. He was one of the best trial lawyers I've ever seen. He's really good. He's a good guy. I think he's honest. I think he's decent. I don't think he would do anything untoward, illegal, unethical, improper. I think if anything, it's like, and I was in that same spot at times. You've got a case that's as big as this and as high profile as this. You don't want to run out and file charges that you aren't sure you can prevail on, or you don't have a really strong case, because you get one shot. And if you file and they get acquitted, you don't ever get another chance. And so if anything, he's erring on that side of caution. And Craig, I think, is probably wise, to be honest with you. I would be cautious too. You can't just run off. You know, the guy was talking about, the investigator was talking about, should have filed negligent homicide or something on there. You're never going to get that. There's no way you can prosecute Conn or whoever for leaving them out in the woods with his leg broken. There's not a legal duty to render aid, and you'll never make it fly. Now, if they got hurt in the car wreck itself, then that's something different. But if they were, and there's no evidence otherwise, if they were hurt of their own trying to get away, whatever they were doing, you're not going to be able to prosecute somebody for that. You just aren't, unless they put a bullet in them to finish them off. But as far as him being broken leg in the argument of the negligent homicide or the felony murder or something like that, you're never going to get there legally in Oklahoma. You're not ever going to get there, because all the evidence points to them being unharmed when they split up in the woods and Conn ran home and left them out there. There's no crime there. If they then get hurt later, that's tragic. But that's not something you can prosecute him for, because there's too much of a disconnect at that point between the fleeing and the running from police, and then a day later they get hurt. I don't think there's any way you could win that. And to try that again, you damage your ability one day if you ever find something or someone ever talks. You've now potentially destroyed your opportunity to prosecute.
We've had somebody talk. Mm-hmm. We've had two people talk.
You haven't gotten there yet. You're only on 10. You got to go to 11.
So, and we also had two people talk. A witness came out and Paula recorded his statement, and he didn't know he was being recorded. Someone close to both Paula's family and close to the Nipps, who claims he was there. And he said the same thing to the FBI. And then you also have someone during Joe's grand jury who also said something almost identical. So my problem is I feel like law enforcement hasn't really done a great job from the get-go about investigating this. From, 2 weeks before they found the car, when they knew that where the car was potentially could have been, which is about 700 yards from the Nipp property line.
Let me ask this. Did anybody ever make a formal request to SBI for their assistance in the investigation? Because the reason I ask that, under Oklahoma law, they can't do anything unless they are officially requested by the governor, the attorney general, sheriff, chief of police, DA. They don't have original jurisdiction over these types of cases. So was there ever a request for OSBI?
There must have been, because when they did the search, I think it was a month later in September, they showed up. David Seals showed up.
Okay.
So they must have. But before that,
But
no.
they were brought in, because I do recall that when we did the show, that Paula did say that they were brought in.
Okay.
We don't know who made the formal request. It would have had to have been Joe or someone from Carter County, the sheriff of Carter County.
That would be a public record. I mean, you could make a request for open records of OSBI.
Well, that's what we're doing, but we've been pushed. There's been pushback on that. Exactly. So we're sending ours in again, but Paula has not received anything, and she's put in a FOIA request. So,
well, I would even do a FOIA request to the Love County Sheriff, the Carter County Sheriff, and the District 20 DA, and see if one of them made the formal, because it has to be a formal request. I mean,
No, we understand that. We understand they have to be called in by the locals. That's
right.
Even the FBI, federal agencies, they can't just, even if they're there, they have to be invited in. So we understand.
See, and I'm curious because I don't know what jurisdiction FBI has in this, because there's not any evidence of interstate criminality.
There was with Joe. There was with Joe.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So were they involved in the Joe deal? Is that who did the Joe Russell investigation?
Yes. And I can send you that if you want to take a look at that. I have the entire transcript. Yeah. I'd love for you to take a look at that, because we've had a lot of other legal people take a look at that, and they're dumbfounded on how Joe walked away with a ankle bracelet and told him to go home after all those felonies.
Yeah, I was really thought it fascinating when Payne. Were you all there when Payne approached?
Yeah,
Yeah, I was in the car.
We were right. We were filming.
I wondered if you all were in the car.
Yeah, we were there.
I was kind of proud of Payne just bailing out and saying, "I'm going to go ask him," because.
Yeah, well, we had a former FBI agent with us, and we also had security with us, armed security. He was well taken care of.
Okay, good. Because I know roughly where Joe lives, and that's kind of a rough and tumble area down there. You got to be careful when you're out running around, poking the hornet's nest down in that part of Love County.
Yeah, we've been down that road before with other small towns as well.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure you have.
Cindy used to cover the Congo politics in Africa, and I've covered the war in Afghanistan. So we're not unfamiliar to tense situations.
You're used to getting shot at. Is what you're saying.
Sometimes, yes. Don't like it.
No, I understand. Well, hearing all the stories, it just reminded me so much of the case that I had when the kid was gone for several years. These people, the culture, they're not that organized. I think it was something, as we said, turned south real bad, real quick, and then it was just covered up. I have a feeling what's left of those two young people is somewhere out there in those woods on that backside of the Nipp property myself.
Well, we've gotten a lot of tips that are areas that are very close to that area as well. So a variety of things. Unfortunately, I think it was just the timing of it. The fact that Joe really kind of decided early on that they were runaways, even though he probably knew they weren't, delayed the investigation, delayed the search. And I think those crucial 2 weeks, the search that actually ended up happening after those 2 weeks was orchestrated by the family.
Right.
So that, for our perspective, just seems bad. It looks bad. It makes law enforcement look bad. It makes the fact that when they were searching those properties next to the Nipp property, that they were out there with guns, making sure no one came on their property.
Right.
There's a lot of things, the optics of it just don't play out right.
No, there's no question. And then I'll never forget the video of Conn when he was being walked out of the courthouse when he pled guilty or was found guilty on the other charge that he went to prison for. That grin on his face, just, I know that probably just angers everybody, because it just looks like, mocking the whole everything. It's a sad deal. I feel so much for the family, and I know they're grasping at straws. I get it. And I feel bad, because I sat with a mother and a father in this case I'm telling you about, and another took years and years and years to prove. And it was after I left that it was years after that they finally proved. And it was somebody finally sitting in a bar one night, one of the actors had a few drinks and confessed to a young woman what happened, and they were able to prosecute the two, and they went to prison. Where I was going, though, was I've sat and talked to these families and just tried to tell them, you can't focus on all these different druggie reports, because they're going to tell you what they think you want to hear, and they're going to come in with some idea. It's not going to be. It's just, there's just too much, and it's muddy in the water. I know, again, you gotta chase them down. I get it. And I don't know if that's affecting law enforcement, because they're hearing so much. I know it has a tendency to, when you keep getting these wild stories of things happening and chained to a tree and put in a box and put in a freezer, and there's a guy, all that stuff. I just don't buy any of it personally. Knowing these people, knowing the culture, knowing how this stuff goes, it's too complex. These aren't complex people. these aren't complex situations. It's really pretty simple, I think.
No, I agree with you. I totally agree with you. I totally agree that it's a simple scenario. But I have a question for you, and it relates to Joe and his hearing, his grand jury hearing. You were a prosecutor, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So knowing what you know, and I'll send you the court transcripts, but basically, Joe, it's very damning for Joe. Multiple felonies, cooking meth in his house, using letting his son distribute it with his police vehicle, going over state lines, bringing it back. He was basically allowing people inside Love County evidence locker, taking drugs out of there and allowing them to sell it. We don't know what else he was taking out there because there was money there too. And there's a whole host of things. How does someone who is an elected official like himself for 16 years, because this is what they just caught him for. He's been doing it for a long time. What kind of deal can he make that will absolve him from all this? What does he have to offer to them to really knock it down to a misdemeanor and felonies, multiple felonies? If it was someone that he busted on that and they were up against those felonies, they'd be in the state pen for probably about 10 years.
Yeah, without saying it, and once I look at it, I will read the stuff. I will get back with you and weigh in, as it were, in full educated opinion. I will say this, two or three things. One, were the witnesses all druggies? Were they all themselves criminal elements? How much physical evidence was there beside just these potential druggies saying these things?
Well, his son was a druggie.
And his
I know. I know. Willie, I know Willie was not a good kid. There's no question. And I've actually heard rumors that Willie was involved in the killing of
Molly and
Colt and Molly.
Mm-hmm.
We've heard that as well.
And, nothing other than people speculating he was involved. I even heard somebody say they thought that they were in a box in the Red River. I don't buy that because, you're having to transport them, and there's too many variables to trying to get that far with that kind of incriminating evidence. But as far as Joe goes, I don't know. He may have given some stuff up to the feds that we don't know about. He may have testified or given them information on some other drug operation done in Texas that led to things that we don't even know. So I will throw that out as the first potential. The other thing is, were the witnesses strong enough and upstanding enough that the feds felt that they had a chance of fully proving their case and getting the time? And I don't know that without looking at the stuff. And thirdly, was there enough evidence to corroborate all these things? Because just a statement alone, you got to be able to corroborate some of it. What did Joe say? So those are things without seeing it, I can't say for certain, but I'm going to throw out. I don't think the feds went easy on him because he's Joe Russell. I mean, I don't think the feds went on easy on him because of political powers down there. Because at the end of the day, outside of that county, Joe Russell doesn't have any political power. He doesn't have congressmen in his pocket. He doesn't have high ups in his pocket. Joe Russell was just the sheriff in a little county in southern Oklahoma. He doesn't have that kind of clout. He just doesn't. He may have thought he did, but he didn't. I don't think the feds went easy because of that.
No, he gave them something.
He had to have given them something that we just don't know about.
Yeah, that's the only logical explanation.
Well, it truly is. And it could be gave him up to the people who were supplying the drugs to his son, that his son was, who knows, it may or may not have resulted in arrests. That's my opinion.
What is the culture like down there in terms of working in the realm that you did?
Most of the all the law enforcement really, truly that I dealt with, for the most part, is pretty good. There is, there's always everywhere. There's always a little bit of turn the head when they're people of power or friends or whatnot. That's not uncommon. I'm not saying it's right. It just happens. I think they're all, for the most part, pretty good people. Well, there's no question a lot of balls were dropped. And it sounds like they were very dismissive of the family. And that's sad and that's inappropriate. I will say, from being in that field, there were some families who were constantly bugging you and bringing stuff to you that they wanted you to look at that you knew was just not possible. And if you didn't run and get an answer quick, they would be all upset. And I get it, and they can be annoying, but you can still be compassionate, and you can still be receptive, and you can still be human and treat them right and listen and try to run those things down when you have time prioritizing what you've got. And if you don't have anything at all, then run them down. Yeah, that's sad. That's too bad. But that doesn't surprise me. I heard those complaints when I was DA.
Well, I have a question for you. And we're going to wrap this up just in a little bit, and then we'll send you the files and stuff. I want to put it in your perspective here. What if Molly was your daughter? How would you react? Being the person you are and stuff like this, and knowing everything you know about the law, how would you approach this?
Well, I'll be honest with you. If Molly were my daughter, I'd have probably been out there under the cover of darkness and walking that property on my own, looking for any kind of evidence, any kind of samples, not at the direction of law enforcement, but I'd be searching. I wouldn't be laying back. And I'm not saying the family's done anything wrong. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I would probably go out there and risk getting hurt to try to find something. That's a lot of property now, and particularly these days. John Nipp just recently died, so the only one I know that's living out there is Ann. I'm not going to worry about that. Conn's apparently in Oklahoma City, the last I heard from your Facebook page. Kobe Barrick, I don't know, is he in prison still?
No, he's out.
Is he out now? Okay. So, I'd probably be out there doing that. I'd probably been sitting up in the Attorney General's office. I'd probably been sitting in the governor's office. I'd have probably been doing that sort of thing, trying to push, get somewhere, get somebody. But then at the end of the day, you still got to have evidence. And I'm not saying that because I haven't heard 11. Sounds like there's something good coming. Curious to hear it. And I've not seen the affidavit, so I don't know everything. But
what you just described is exactly what Paula has been doing.
Girl, real talk. This whole "it's new year, time to reinvent myself" trash is not the vibe for 2024. You can find someone who loves you for you, as you are. You don't need to read a stack of self-help books, only eat sad salads, or start meditating at 5 a.m. to be ready for dating. So yeah, my advice is to download Bumble and find someone who embraces you the way you are right now. Let me know how it goes.
Inspired by the life of the savvy and ambitious Colombian businesswoman Griselda Blanco comes a new Netflix original limited series. Griselda tells the story of a devoted mother who, with her lethal blend of charm and relentless savagery, creates one of the most powerful cartels in history. Witness Sofia Vergara's captivating transformation into the godmother of the underworld. Griselda, streaming January 25th, only on Netflix.
We sent Gary the files from Joe and Willie Russell's judicial proceedings, along with the entire recording of the eyewitness from episode 11, and we'll hear his thoughts on them next week.
Up next, we are revealing another recorded interview Paula conducted with someone who called her with a tip on the case in the early days of the investigation. Again, we are withholding the names and altering their voices to protect their identity.
The reason for my call is I lived up there in Marietta at the time that everything happened. I had worked for Joe Russell also as a jailer. The day that they came up missing, do you know?
Yes.
Okay. I had a discussion. We had talked, and had been out to Conn Nipp's place that morning. Conn Nipp apparently had a freezer on his front porch, but was on the phone with somebody else and heard him say, "I can't use this freezer because they'll know it's gone." So somebody that he was on the phone with brought another freezer out there to him, a used freezer. Have you ever heard of caustic?
Yes.
Okay. I strongly believe, and told me this himself because he lived right down the street from me. I shot horses out there for about 8 years.
Uh-huh.
And I believe that they used that freezer to put them in and poured that caustic on them to heat everything up. That freezer is still on John Nipp's place. rode that horseback along with other people in search for them. Am I pretty clear?
Yes.
So far?
Yes.
Of what you know?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I wasn't sure. I tried to get somebody to listen to me up there.
Mm-hmm.
I even talked to the FBI about Joe Russell and other things going on there whenever Joe Russell was after my cousin. And I've been wanting to talk to somebody about this. OSBI, I do not trust them, only because of my own personal reasons for how they treated the case on my cousin. And then my cousin wound up with a broke neck in a motorcycle wreck that Love County had their hands involved in.
Do you believe his death was an accident?
I believe it was a staged accident. Yes, I do.
Okay.
And
I do too.
I believe that they broke his neck because he got up and walked and said that he needed to lay down. He didn't feel too good. And when he was on the ground, the first officer there was off duty. I believe he broke his neck. No, he didn't kill him at that time.
Right.
Because went to they took him down there to Dallas, the hospital down there.
Who was the officer? Okay, I don't know that name.
Well, I believe he's in Ardmore now. I know he was working in Ardmore.
Have you heard the name Rob Branch?
No, ma'am.
The person you're referring to that Conn was on the phone with asking for a freezer was Rob Branch.
Okay.
That is a cousin of Conn's that lives up in Wilson on Bronco Road.
Okay.
And we know he delivered a freezer out there. He admitted to Molly's grandpa and uncle that he had delivered a freezer out there. He's not a good guy. And
there ain't any of them good.
No.
And, you know, I mean, I even know the death of...
Was it Jordan Buckaloo?
Jordan, yes, Jordan. Yes. I even know how that went down and tried to get them... I talked to them about, to the OSBI and the FBI myself, Joe Russell, and tried to get them to listen to me about the death of Jordan. They wouldn't do it.
Well, listen, I have got a recorded statement of a girl who came to me over Jordan Buckaloo. She had no information on Molly's case, but she didn't know who to trust, and she wanted to tell somebody what she knew about Jordan's death. Mm-hmm. And she gave me a complete statement of exactly what happened. Uh-huh. And I turned that over to the OSBI.
Yeah, you can't trust them.
No, they did nothing with the information. Yeah. I had even talked to Mary Buckaloo before I turned it over, and I asked her, do you want to pursue this? And she told me yes. This was not long before she died. Before she didn't even know she had cancer yet. Mm-hmm. And
I knew that she had cancer and went pretty quick.
Yes, she did. And I was so heartbroken that I was not able to help her get closure before she passed.
Sure.
But they have the recording, they have the information, and I mean exactly everybody involved. Mm-hmm. And exactly what happened. I mean, the girl told me exactly what happened to Jordan. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been a mess. You've never been told of a location this freezer may have been put?
All I know, it was delivered on John Nipp's place. Now, here's my thought. At that time, everything happened. The grass was low. The grass was dead because of the winter. You know, it was coming back. I believe that it was put off out there on the property someplace in the ditch, and the ditch was broke down over the freezer. That's what I believe. And then by the time they got out, everybody got out there to start looking, grass had already started coming back, time for the grass to grow over the freezer. I believe that an embankment of a creek bed or something, that's what the vision I'm getting covered the freezer. Mm-hmm. So you're not going to see it. You're not going to find it unless you've got a metal detector or a helicopter or something.
Yeah.
That an infrared that would pick up. You're not going to find any bodies because of the caustic. And Joe Russell told Conn about the caustic.
Okay, how do you know that?
I'm not sure if it was had said that. I did my best to get Joe Russell home. I wanted that son of a bitch home so bad, you know, because, I mean, I know how corrupt it was. I worked there for Joe Russell.
You mentioned the caustic soda. Have you ever heard of a name that brought the caustic soda or got the caustic soda to the area?
No, I know. Now told me that he saw a bag on Conn Nipp's porch that morning, and when he came back that evening, now I don't know why he came back that evening, but only half the bag was there.
Well, I know spoke to, I'll just say, his actions have been kind of odd. We had in October of 2013, we had a benefit roping to raise money for a reward and stuff, and was very involved in that, and he supplied the roping calves and stuff like that.
Sure.
And it was a big event, and he was very involved there in the beginning, and then he completely backed off, and I've been told some things.
If he's backed off, it was because of somebody threatening him or somebody putting him on the line. That's just what I believe. No.
Yeah. It was just very odd, and did say to somebody one time that he was down there talking to Colby Barrick, and Conn and a boy by the name of. They came over the high fence from the south of Colby's place, and they were dressed up in camouflage and had on camo faces and stuff, and they came walking by, and I guess Colby said, we're going to have to do something about Conn. He's killing John Nipp. Whatever it is he's doing, and he's killing John Nipp. Now,
well, John Nipp was old and blind.
Well, yeah. But I guess all the crap that was going on was killing John, and nothing you have heard as far as what happened to them. Have you heard anything as far as what happened to Molly and Colt?
One of the other scenarios that I was told was that there was some drugs involved and some money involved, that the drugs had not been paid for by some people out of Wilson. Some pretty heavy hitters. What I mean by that is people really involved in the drug world of methamphetamine, and that there was a considerable amount of dope that somebody had to pay for, and Conn Nipp was given the choice of either. Because it was Conn that did it, but Molly and Colt knew about it. They were with him, but I heard that Conn did not want to pull the trigger. Whoever the dope come from, that they shot him. They shot them both.
Your information is very interesting, because that tidbit about what heard Conn Nipp say.
I want them kids found too, because my heart goes out to you and the family and everything for what y'all been put through, and for such a corrupt county and people. Joe Russell, that coward.
Yeah, he should have been gone a long time ago. You know, this wouldn't be happening right now if your had been sheriff, you know, or anybody else for that matter. We would be in a completely different. I mean, Molly would probably still be gone, but at least we would know. And Joe covered it up. You know, there's no doubt in my mind that he's covered this up the entire time. Have you heard the name?
He's my cousin.
Okay.
I can't tell you how well I know him, because I don't know him that well. I met him when he first got out of prison, I guess, because he wound up coming to jail there while I was in jail. Okay. That's when I met him.
So you're talking about the daddy, the older one, or are you talking?
No, I'm talking about the younger one.
Or he's very good friends with Conn Nipp.
I don't know which one that would be. I don't know the older dudes.
Well, it's the younger one.
Yeah, I know him.
Okay, he's very good friends with Conn. And I recently made a post, and I only used the guy's initials, and I said he goes by nickname. I don't know if you noticed the post or not.
Yes, I did.
Okay, that's I'm referring to.
Okay.
He was in jail at Love County, the FBI, the OSBI, the U.S. Marshals. They were all there with was giving them information, and he was stating that he helped dig the grave.
Kidding?
Yes, he did. They even were able, on his information, that everything that he was giving them, they were able to obtain a warrant for a very specific area of the Nipp property.
Right, I remember that. I remember whenever the search went on.
Yeah, and they had the crime scene unit out there, the whole 9 yards. And once they got out there, reneged on his story and said he made it all up. Well, from everything I've been told about, he's not the type who likes attention, not that kind of attention. And for him to implicate himself in a double murder, he didn't do that because he didn't know anything. He did that because he knows something.
Let me tell you this. That day, during that search of the property and everything, that Joe Russell was not supposed to be out there, correct?
Right.
Joe Russell was out there because I ran into him on the road there, not on the Nipp's property, but he was damn sure out there and asked me what I was doing out there. And I said, hell, Joe, I can ask you the same thing. I got more right being out here now than you do, because I knew he wasn't supposed to be out there. That's the damn truth right there.
Well, is working over at Gainesville at a horse ranch. I made that post. I expected to hear from him or his mother. I know they're talking about it. I do know that, but they think I'm grasping at straws, but the thing that they don't know is I'm not. The reason that post was made is because I've been on the phone with the FBI. The FBI believes knows and they believe his story wholeheartedly. They just couldn't convince him to show them the location. It's not over for and I would be willing to help us out.
Sure.
If he would help us out.
Sure.
But he's strung out pretty bad right now, I hear. So
he's what?
Strung out on drugs.
Yeah. He liked them.
Yeah. I've got some things in the works right now, so hopefully we can convince to step up, or you know what, if he don't, he can go to prison with the rest of them. I won't help him out at all.
Exactly. I agree. It would be hard for me not to want him to go too.
Right.
Regardless.
Right. Of
what he does or doesn't do. Doing what's right is the right thing to do. And if you had knowledge of it all these years, by God, you need to go down with the rest of them.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. I think the type of kid who was a follower, and I think Conn manipulated him a lot. Here's the deal. I could help him out on this situation, keep him out of prison with the proper information. I've already spoke with law enforcement. I've spoke with the DA. The person that comes forward with the information, I can get them help. I mean, I can keep them from prison.
Sure.
But I don't think this is getting it. I don't think his mom's getting it. I don't know his mom, but I hear she's something else. I did speak to an old girlfriend of his who said that beat the crap out of her, and his mother would say to her, you probably deserved it. And I'm like, well, that's just, if my son beat the crap out of a girl, I would beat the crap out of my son, So anyway.
I will say this. My first impression, and then knowing him while he was in jail, he tried to play that, that big bad long-haired doper guy, locked up in jail, push the guard around and all that. I didn't let him do that with me. I didn't let none of them do that with me. I mean, I'd go off in the cell by myself, whenever they threatened me or whatever. Have you ever seen?
Not in person, just on Facebook.
He's skinny, and as little as I do know, I never knew him to be strung out. He always kept his wits about him. He was pretty, like you said, to himself. I didn't know him to be strung out. And I know people, I still have contacts up there, in Marietta. Hell, that's where I was practically raised at.
Mm-hmm.
I know people up there, and they know me.
Right.
And these
and he told the FBI and the U.S. Marshals and them during that interview, and there's proof of this, so we know he's telling the truth, that he got a phone call from Conn after all this happened. And Conn told him he needed to talk to him. Went out to the Nipp property, but he felt like it was a setup. And so he took a gun with him. And he was outside talking to Conn. And Johnny Nipp, Conn's dad, comes outside and says the FBI is on their way. And Conn took off running, and then took off running a different direction. He felt like that was all a setup deal, that the FBI really wasn't on their way, that they were trying to get him into the woods. And so, but anyway, took off running into the woods. He felt like Conn was chasing him. And then he ended up out on Oswald Road. Did. He went through a creek bed, I think, out to Oswald Road. Well, a man passed by and saw side of the road, didn't know him. He had one boot on, one boot off. He had a dog with him. The guy called the police, and they ended up calling an ambulance to pick up Deuce and take him to the hospital. He was severely dehydrated, and he was stating in the ER that he knew what happened to Molly and Colt, and nobody ever did anything about it. But I mean, there's record of law enforcement, of an ambulance being dispatched. There's record of him being in the ER. You know, it's a true statement that he gave. So they believe everything that he stated was true. But anyway, it is what it is. They didn't do anything about it.
Well, have you worked or spoken with who is with the FBI?
Oh, absolutely. Me and him talked on the phone 3 times last week.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Is that the first time you spoke to him?
Yes.
In your opinion?
Oh, I think a lot of
Did?
Yes. What about you?
And he had a lot of information that would have put Joe Russell in jail. That sure enough put him in prison. The stolen cars, the chopped cars, all this other stuff. Because Joe Russell had an in for my cousin for years. For years.
What year was that?
It's probably 2011.
So this is the first investigation that they had into Joe Russell. Okay. See, they had an investigation into Joe Russell before the one where they finally were able to charge him with some stuff. And even Joe told me at the Trading Post one day, he said, you know, Paula, the FBI has tried to investigate me before. They never found anything on me, and they won't now. And I said, really? I said, because you just don't hold your breath, Joe. I said, because they're coming for you. Mm-hmm. And that was in June, and they arrested Joe just about 2 weeks after our conversation. Because the minute I got in the car and left Joe, I called and I said, look, he says you don't have crap on him. You're not going to be able to arrest him, that you've been laughed out at the federal DA's office. And he said he's got another thing coming. And he just laughed. And it wasn't 2 weeks later that they arrested him. And the minute they put him in handcuffs, called me and said, we got him. Mm-hmm. I said, I know, I have somebody following you.
Pretty good.
He said, I'm not surprised.
Right.
So anyway, I trust him. I do. I know he cannot stand Joe. They worked really close with the Oklahoma Attorney General's office as well, and I sat in the courtroom with and the investigator from the AG's office during Joe's hearing. Boy, the AG's office was very verbal about Joe Russell in front of everybody. It was great, actually.
Right, I bet it was.
Yeah.
Next time on Partners in True Crime.
We're going to be releasing new information in recordings that have never been heard before. We will also be talking to more power players in the legal field who will help us unravel the clues about what happened to Molly and Colt.
If you or anyone you know is suffering from a methamphetamine addiction, please contact the American Meth Addiction Hotline.
If you or anyone you know has been the victim of sexual abuse, please contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline.
For any tips relating to the disappearance of Molly Miller and Colt Haynes, please contact 833-4-MOLLY and Colt, and they will be directed to the proper law enforcement agency.
All rights reserved. This has been a production of 722 Media Content. Please visit our website where you can subscribe to the podcast, find show notes, and listen to Vi's original song, Take Me Back, written for Molly Miller.